Welcome back to the Misfortune Podcast, episode 2. Tonight, we are going to talk about... let's introduce ourselves. So, I'm Reggie.
This is Jinwoo.
Sora Bell. Hello.
Jay Black. How's it going?
We have a skeleton crew tonight, but we should be able to keep it rolling with tonight's conversation. Tonight we're going to be talking about the community and, it's how it affects gameplay. And I wanted to start off by talking about, the first time that... Actually, let's go to where we kind of got onto this topic. Our friendly neighborhood dragoon, Mama Cat, dropped us a link to a Reddit thread about a white mage that was struggling to clear the MSQ dungeon, or not the MSQ dungeon, but the MSQ trial, the most recent one with the one-on-one against Xenos. And that kind of reminded me of how people were complaining, the community was complaining about...
I should say that this is for patch 4.56, so the second half of the 4.5 storyline, where we fight Xenos.
Right.
Just in case this gets dated.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, it is 4.56. This is the last story patch we're going to get until Shadowbringers.
Yeah.
Continue. Oh yeah, so I mean, this kind of reminded me of Steps of Faith. How many here were here during A Realm Reborn?
Not me.
I was.
I was there at the end of Realm Reborn.
I'm a Heaven's Ward child.
I was here for Steps of Faith when it originally came out. I don't know. I had never had a problem with it. Go ahead.
What's that?
I said I never had a problem with Steps of Faith when it came out, but I remember that a lot of people couldn't do it because they couldn't do mechanics. So was... And then the acquiescence of the devs in nerfing it was a thing that happened.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask, you're the veteran here on The Realm Reborn. When I got into Bishop, I think I just got it done on the second try. What was it like at the beginning?
Well, there was a couple of different mechanics where you had to stun the boss, and there was the Dragon Slayers from Bismarck. You guys probably know those, right?
Yeah.
So there was some cannons, and there was some Dragon Slayer stuff.
Yeah.
And you had to use those. Otherwise, you couldn't stop the boss at specific points. And honestly, I think a lot of it was people there was also tanks that wouldn't just pick up the ads, right?
Oh,
as well. And so it's just a mess.
They still don't.
Yeah, they would just wreck the healers because the ads would immediately lock onto the closest white mage and then just wreck them.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember when I first cleared that. When it came out, I got up at 2 or 4 o'clock in the morning to clear it, and it was we did it 3 times, and on the 3rd time, Vishap was on his last little slam before the gate went down, and we cleared it.
Oh man,
it was down to the wire, and we were it was a coordinated effort. Everybody had kind of an idea of what they were supposed to do. I mean, this was ACT was a thing, but we didn't have flogs or anything like that. To really kind of dissect everybody's rotations and stuff like that. It was just kind of you could tell if someone was kind of lower than where they should have been. But
not how to fix it.
Yeah, and I mean, it was kind of hard with that fight too, because you had people Black Mage, go, you're gonna hit the Dragon Slayers when we tether Vishap, and we had one healer that was in charge of cannons and one tank that was in charge of cannons. So I mean, it was a whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. It was. You had to designate. It was like probably the first time in the MSQ. I'm trying to fact check myself while I'm saying
Yeah.
this. That where you had to like designate people for a trial instance like this, other than extreme primals.
But those aren't a part of the MSQ, so
Right, those weren't a part of the MSQ, and so people were just like freaking out. They're like, we
Yeah.
can't do this.
you have to be good. Honestly, I think that was probably, just from what it sounds, the hardest piece of content to ever get introduced to the main scenario quest. Shinryu,
Go on.
well, I think vanilla Vishap, to be specific, right? Like, unnerfed version would probably be harder. But, I don't know.
I wish I had checked the notes on it because I don't even remember what exactly they nerfed. It's just like, oh, you could ignore everything now. Basically, it just became like a huge burn, is what it was in the end.
Alright. Mechanics just started to matter less.
Yeah.
Is to be completely honest though, I'm torn on that fight because it seems like mechanically one of the more interesting fights they've really introduced. There's a lot more going on than just wail on the boss. Even though it still kind of comes down to that, next time we would see something like that, it's kind of like Dragon Killers and Bismarck, and then we really don't see interactable items that debuff the boss in any way, shape, or form ever again. Duty actions try and implement that, though. I guess you could say duty actions that we have now for fights like Omega 11 normal, not Savage, normal, and Demon Chatternook Savage, Catastrophe Savage. Those fights seem more like a spiritual successor in the idea of having mechanics in the fight that you have to, or things you have to pay attention to, aside from just what the boss is doing and what you're doing.
I'm okay with tropes being a thing in fights in the MSQ. I think the main thing about the MSQ is people were frustrated that they could not finish the story because they couldn't cooperate in a fight. And really, at the end of the day, when you think about it, I have to agree with Yoshi P that you should have to earn that end of the fight or the end of the main scenario. I don't think it should just be given. And I mean, so at the end of this expansion, you could say that Xenos fight was kind of that test, but it wasn't anywhere near comparable to Vishap. Or
I was gonna say that, yeah.
Or let's see, at the end of Heaven's Word,
I think it was the Griffin.
Yeah, there's Belsar's Wall, and
I think that was just it, Belsar's Wall.
Yeah, I mean, that was a decent dungeon end boss.
Still not quite up there. I mean,
No.
It's a dungeon, right?
Right, it's a dungeon.
It's really hard to like quantify the success of dungeons when they're all so archaic.
But even so,
I think
he was a decent end boss for a dungeon, I would say.
Yeah,
in my opinion, he had several more mechanics than.
He's harder by virtue of just needing other people to do it, right?
So all these things. Yeah, go on.
I don't think it's necessarily hard. The problem with Yoshi P's thought process, and to be fair, I agree with both what you said, Jabe, and Yoshi P, and how players should have to earn.
He said that was Shinryu. Right?
Yeah, I agree. I would love that sort of thing in this game. It's just there is no incentive for them to do that, and that's the unfortunate part.
Well, there's no incentive for them to get better other than the story.
But like,
Right.
there's no
The story-
incentive. There's no incentive for them to try and make their players better. That's the thing, right? As long as
no
they're getting their
incentive for
money,
the devs to make
the players better, to incentivize the players in any shape or form in required content. And the MSQ was the only piece of required content that you have to do in this game to really experience it, right? You don't have to do any version of the raids, normal or savage. You don't have to do EX trials at all. You don't even have to do some trials. You don't have to do Eureka or anything like that. The MSQ you do have to do, right? So
Yeah, you have to get through the MSQ.
yeah,
And more stuff that is branched off.
there's no
MSQ.
incentive for them to make the MSQ difficult in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I mean, making it too difficult, like extreme or savage.
I don't mean like
is
I don't mean on that extreme, right? That's I mean like difficult at all, because I mean they're all a joke, and it really, for me personally, it becomes a little too hard to be invested in the story when I'm queuing into trials and just face rolling them. I've never really felt challenged by an instance at all.
That's kind of your testament to your skill, though, I would say, because
But
I think there are a lot of...
I was bad at one point, right?
Hold on. Well, I mean, let Reggie say what he's going to say.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like you know, you've been doing this a while, like, you know, the rodeo, and you know, you're really good at the game, but like
That's me now, though. I appreciate the compliment, but at one point I was new, and it wasn't hard then, and I was playing the job wrong.
Yeah,
then.
that's the thing about video games, though. Like, you play so many video games, you're able to rationalize these mechanics that are being thrown to you in this
Well,
MMO.
This
You're
is my
familiar.
first true MMO, I should say.
Yeah.
Prior to this, it was just Destiny, and that's a completely different type of game, right? That's just a shooter. This is the first time I even learned what a global cooldown was, and what it meant, and what an off global cooldown meant. I was one of those players when I first started that would use Trick Attack and treat it like it was a global cooldown, if I ever got to use it, because I wasn't using it through Suiton. I was using it through fucking Hide, because I think that was the stealth thing that Ninja does. That's the other way they have of
You can
triggering.
only use that out of battle.
Yeah, right.
He was the Trick Attack on Hide player.
Which means I never used it on anything that required you to pull aggro immediately.
He never did a Suiton, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and
Wow.
honestly, that's
So
my
you
fault for
never read
reading.
the tooltips. That's what you're saying.
well,
I read the tooltips. I just didn't know what I was reading.
Oh, okay.
And there, to be fair, while I won't say that Suiton is an example of that, there are a fair amount of tooltips, or there were a fair amount of tooltips in this game during the Heavensward era that just said stuff, but it was really hard to like for example, if you go back and read the original text for duality, good luck figuring out what that said.
Yeah.
They had to change it quite a number of times before it made sense in what it did.
Right.
So-
I agree with you that, I mean, I don't know about the incentive thing. I understand, like, we were all bad at one point. Like, I was that Dragoon running through the dungeon ahead of the tank because I thought the A on the party list meant you were doing the most damage, right? So there was no ACT at that point.
Yeah.
Wow.
And even then, like, my point is, even throughout all that mediocrity and terrible displays of playing this game, right? The MSQ never felt hard at all. It
Yeah.
felt like a base roll. Granted, I didn't do Vishamp. Maybe that would have been the wall, but it wasn't until I started doing EX primals that I really started to notice, like,
Well, when you're leveling, right, the 1 through 50 shouldn't be difficult. I mean, there were things that were difficult, like
even in
Arm Hill,
Heaven's
right?
when it was current, and maybe
So-
it was a victim of better design.
Well, I guess if you guys started playing at Heaven's Word, in A Realm Reborn, the 1 through 50 stuff, there were some dungeons that we face roll now that back then we didn't have the gear to face roll things, and they were not there are things in those dungeons that people could not surmount, like, unless they knew what they were doing.
Oh my god,
Like-
Jabe, it's all coming back to me. And it's like, oh, Jesus.
Like, you roll up in the Temple of Card, right? You're like, oh, what up? It's a B. How's it going, Mr. B?
Oh no! Finally.
What? Why is the tank dead? Why is he dead?
Why is it
To be
taking
fair,
so-
that was happening in Heaven's Ward too. I don't think they nerfed that until later of Heaven's Ward.
was that in that one dungeon?
Like bees were just one-shotting.
How did I get Doom? What is the glowy platform for?
Oh my god, that boss was a bitch.
The giant freaking eyeball in Labyrinth of the Ancients. Where you have to stand on one side and keep alternating when he does the light puddles, and if you forget, you'll eventually start taking more damage.
I was watching a dude stream the other day just randomly. I didn't know who this guy. He's from the EU or something, and I guess he played WoW. He's a WoW refugee, and he rolls up in the Labyrinth of the Ancients, and they're just face rolling everything, and I'm like, yeah, you do that in Bone Dragon back when you were minimum item level, all those skeletons explode and you dead. That's how that works.
I mean, that's how A Realm Reborn, I mean, it did a good job at, making you coordinate, making you team up and having to, work it out with your alliance members.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jin, go ahead.
There's a lot of dungeons in the Realm Reborn that used to be quote unquote hard that you just don't see anymore in Heaven's Ward and Stormblood. Like the scale has dropped considerably.
So
Yeah.
if we're specifically talking dungeons and dungeon difficulty, it's hard to say because a part of me feels like dungeons themselves as content has been handled incredibly poorly in this game. I don't like, especially at FanFest when they're doing, they're advertising new dungeon concept art. They'll show it off and then they'll say challenging new dungeons. Correct? So there's never been challenging.
Well,
Nah,
go back to leveling in Stormblood now, and then you can. I'll just give an example for Stormblood when we were leveling. It didn't get hard till Bardam's Metal, right? But even then, Bardam's Metal. Okay, the second
So
boss
was that
is,
difficult?
is
But hold on, are you masquerading like low
Hold on,
gear
let me finish.
options
Let me
as difficulty?
finish. I mean, let me finish. The puzzle for the second boss, like, people couldn't do that at first, but eventually they got it, right? So, but the only difficulty is that thing hitting harder, right? And the only puzzle was the puzzle with the second boss.
That sounds more like gear progression, not mirroring the piece of content they queued up for. Because they were probably running in with their 260 gear that they were wearing from Endgame Heaven's Ward. Maybe it'd be 270 if they were raiding, right? Or decided to do the 24 mans and get to as close to max eye level as possible before the expansion. But prior to that, it's all cake. And if you actually take the gear that the story gives you as it's giving it to you and get lucky with drops on the dungeons before, or just buy the the normal quality gear from vendors as you're leveling up, that's not difficult whatsoever. Like, the hitting hard part, it's not really true. The tank takes a lot of damage, but you could also attribute that to tanks not really using, on average, tanks will more often than not use their cooldowns properly, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you went from Shishui to Bardam's Metal, there was a marked increase in the power of the mobs. But at the same time, your gear eventually overshadows that. So it all comes down to your.
Is
gear
that difficulty or
progression
not?
as
Though?
well? It is difficulty because if you don't know how to deal with harder hitting mobs, then you
Buy the gear at that level.
Yeah, you can get the gear, and it kind of helps a little bit. Hey, what's up?
I would think it helps exponentially.
Well, I mean, I would kind of agree with Jabe about the difficulty thing, because if you're a tank that, you're just kind of, swinging the sword around, and then you show up into Bardam's Metal, and you haven't really, gotten in your job or read your tooltips, it's more apparent to the rest of the party that you haven't really, read up on how to handle this appropriately.
You also gotta test the fact that a lot of people who had never played Final Fantasy 14 just got the jump potions. They skipped the story.
Does that equate to the difficulty of the dungeon? Is what I'm asking.
You're talking about a different kind of difficulty. You're trying to bisect difficulty. Yes, there are multiple forms of difficulty. This is one type of difficulty, and that is mobs are hitting harder. The difficulty I think you're trying to talk about is the intricacy of the mechanics of the dungeon. Those are two different types of difficulty. But
this game literally gives you gear during your progression, right? Like, so maybe if you're leveling on an additional job after already doing the content the first time, and you don't and the game's obviously not feeding you gear as you do quests anymore, I guess. But even then, right, the vendors exist for that purpose. They sell the normal quality gear, and it does work.
I mean, even so, if you're a person who's just coming into the game, right? So there's multiple tiers of players. There's the veterans. I've been playing since A Realm Reborn. I walk into Bardham's Metal and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to start using my cooldowns, right, more efficiently. And so that doesn't affect me too much. Then you got the guy who walks into Bardham's Metal and he's like, he's got 260 gear because he didn't raid, and he just came back to the game after a long break. He walks into Bardham's Metal, is like, oh shoot, why did I just die to the first pack?
You also gotta take into consideration the fact that a lot of new players, including Mama Cat, they didn't do Heaven's Sword, they didn't do A Realm Reborn, they just bought jump potions, and they missed out on all that learning curve that we had at the beginning that tells us how to play our jobs.
I hate to tell you this, but this late in the game, the learning curve isn't there.
Oh,
it's no longer there.
How you doing?
Yes. They're specifically talking about the learning curve of when you start. So if somebody used the jump potion immediately at the beginning, their learning curve starts at level 60 instead of someone who would start at level 1.
A tank just bought a jump potion. He got to level 60. He got he got through all the story. He didn't do any of the story, which there was a bit of a learning curve, like a time to tell you how to do your abilities. And this guy just goes in, I'm a Dark Knight main, and I'm just going to go in, don't even use Grit, don't even use that other one. I forgot what it's called.
Dark Side.
Yeah. And it's like, he just takes all this damage. It's like, oh my god, what do I do? Why am I doing this? Why is this not accessible to me? It's like, oh my god. That's what he mean. That's pretty much Bardham's Metal for a lot of newbies.
I mean, when you... Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, on the jump potion thing, like, that's a whole nother discussion, but
yeah.
I always felt like the jump potions and the story skips, I felt like that should have been reserved for people that already had... a level 70 character had already done the story at least once, because like you said,
the problem is that the story is, at this point in time, is incredibly cumbersome.
It's prohibitive to new players.
Yeah.
Any player who beats Ultima almost quits within the first 2 days after doing all those quests.
It's far too many fetch quests in that little gap there.
That too.
Yeah. I mean, I've leveled 2 alts, right? And I haven't used any skip potions, and it was annoying. I'm just saying.
As well. It was traumatic.
It took me no time to go do a quest, right? You skip all the cutscenes. I've already seen all the cutscenes, so I'm not gonna watch them again. So I just skip all the cutscenes, and I'm like, man, this part took a lot longer when you weren't skipping cutscenes, but at the same time, I'm going through and I'm just doing quest after quest after quest, and I'm like, am I done yet?
Yeah, so. The part to get the Titan, the first time, is really annoying.
Oh yeah, I like it, man. I like the little, oh hey, we're gonna make a feast for you, but you don't know.
But you...
Yeah. Oh, is that the one where you have to get all of your party favors, basically?
Yeah, you gotta get the cheese and the wine and all that stuff.
So back to the original topic about difficulty of the MSQ. As much as I appreciate a more difficult learning curve, I feel that their methods of giving us the MSQ have kind of dulled a little bit. I do like the I can't remember what it's called. It's the role play system where you play as another character. But the problem with that is that it was less noticeable with Y'shtola because she was a healer, a white mage specifically, and she had I believe like Stone and Arrow 2 and Cure, and I think a size or something. Those are like the 4 skills she had. And as a healer, you don't really do much than that in the main game, correct? But it was really bad this time around with Hien, where he's a samurai, a melee DPS, and he only had Hakaze, Gyoten, which is the dash step that moves them in, Higenbana.
Those weren't the names that was given for him, but yeah, that's the.
They were called something different, but the icons were literally those.
Essentially the same.
And
yeah, they were the same.
Yeah, they were called something different, but they mostly did all the same stuff. I think he also had a unique healing move too, and that was it.
Second wind, that's what it was.
Oh, it was actually second wind.
It was just second wind.
Oh. And I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
If it's gonna be
a bad name already, what the fuck, Ian?
It's not even that, right?
Look at what you got when you played Alphanod. You got Ruin.
Yeah.
Ruin and a dot.
He had like Tribind for some reason. They just like threw it on there.
Yeah.
Like, there you go. You're never gonna use it, but remember when that was a skill?
Maybe it was. I was just pleasantly surprised with Alpha Note, and so I didn't take his travesty into account. Granted, he's an Arcanist. They aren't really doing much aside from that.
Well,
but
it's not
when
like he does much to begin with.
when the samurai is using one attack and like a dot, I kind of cringed when I was playing as Hien.
Well, it was weird because it was like all the other two were both like casters, right? And he was melee. There's no cast time, so you're just spamming.
Hakaze. I really think they should have. It would have been better if he had at least one of the full combos.
It would have been. But I mean, I think they're only just. I don't know if they're gonna keep it for Shadowbringers, but I think they'll only have like 4 moves each time, just to keep it simple. Because really, what it boils down to is when we're talking about the difficulty of the MSQ.
It's not.
We got people who are coming in who don't know what they're doing, and that's why they keep it kind of,
Which is fine, but I think we're at a point, right? I think so with the expansions. The required content, there should be a natural progression that reaches its peak in the quality of the content that the MSQ requires of us. And it should be harder towards the end and easier towards the beginning. And it should reset at the beginning of every expansion, right?
I would be okay with more puzzles. Like, I don't need you to make the fights more mechanically heavy, but I would really like it if the dev team would add puzzles to the routes and not just make it a corridor of enemies every time.
Yeah, dungeons need if we're talking specifically about dungeons as far as puzzles and other means of traversing them, they are too archaic. They feel like a relic of a Realm Reborn. I'll probably say this a lot tonight because it is so true. For every other piece of content that they've introduced, they've all been polished up to the point where if you look at them in their original iterations versus their current incarnations, it's generally a more positive transition. But dungeons, they don't feel worse because they look visually better, right? But they almost feel like they require less from you now than they did back then.
They do require less.
And it just makes it feel like a lateral transition, like nothing changed. they've been playing it safe and playing it and riding dungeons straight the entire way. And I also kind of have a problem with the terminology they use for raids and trials too, because their trials are not raids. Or how do I put this? Their raids are not trials. Their trials make sense. Like when you call it a trial, it means to stand up against an opposition, regardless of what you get in the end. That's the point of a trial. It's the boss fight. But a raid implies entering some sort of area, fortress, stronghold, whatever you want to call it, clearing and progressing through that content. I'd almost say it instant content in one fell swoop and getting loot, killing trash along the way.
I would be okay if it wasn't necessarily one instance, but a series of instances where you can clear one and then you can go into the next one. So kind of like checkpoints. So.
I think it could be one big instance with checkpoints too. That also works. I think
I think if the kind of raid you're talking about where people have to progress, you have to think about the time frame, right? So how long does it take a group to get through a raid, or initially through a raid?
You know, that's the point of the raid, right? It's supposed to be something you take your time out to do. You know,
that would be okay for Savage. I don't think it would be okay for the way they have it set up now.
Well, for normal mode, probably not. But I do think Savage, like, it just feels so disoriented, right? It makes the tiers feel a lot less special than they otherwise would have been. For example, Alexander, Alexander tried to have some of this. I do remember. Coil tried to have it too, but they were both not exactly what I'm talking about. They had little moments at the beginning of each instance where you could just like look around you and take it all in. Like, it was really nice to see what it was like on Dalamud while it was still floating together, right? Or in Alexander, the Gabi city, going inside and looking around and the culture. It was even awesome in A10, where when you're grinding on the rails to get to the arena in A10, you can actually see the arena from A7. Yeah. Like, that sort of thing feels good. But in Deltascape, right? So you start out in a raid dedicated entirely to Final Fantasy V's Rift.
It's just an arena.
Yeah, you start out in the Rift, and then next thing you know, you're in the bottom of a castle. But you know what castle you're in, right? Because a cutscene shows you going to the dungeon parts of that castle. And then we're led to believe that the upper parts of that castle is where Halicarnassus Arena is. And then somehow you end up in the void with Exdeath. Or further in the void with Exdeath. But if that was all like seamless, that you could feel it, I just think that'd be more traditional to what it means to raid, instead of these all feeling like segmented trials.
The reason they did that, though, is because of the backlash they got from Turn 3 in general, as well as the rest of the other parts of the dungeons.
But the reason they get the backlash is because they don't incentivize doing anything besides killing the boss and getting the loot the boss drops, right?
That's all a raid is for. Like, they don't have world drops in this game, and they can't put them in.
That's a problem. Why can't they put them, right?
Because they don't have enough data space for it, probably.
Bosses used to drop... to this day, certain bosses still drop items that are high-value mats. Like, all primals have them. Raid bosses used to have them, but for some reason they stopped. Actually, that's not even true. God Kefka has the little alpha feather. You could get that from there. So
I'm pretty sure. I mean, when Scythe talks about the backlash, right? He's talking about people. Well, first of all, there was no normal and savage until second coil.
Yes, I know.
And so people just got. Well, turn 3 was
to be
useless.
fair, second coil savage was different than like Alexander normal and Alexander savage. Second coil savage was more of a
ultimate. But we're talking generalities here. So,
but the loot was exactly the same in second coil savage as it was in normal mode of
right.
Coil. So there was no reason.
Incentive to do Second Coil Savage was the title. That was the only incentive to do it.
But with normal
people did
mode
it for that. People did it for that reason. But what we're talking about is people did not like the commitment to having to go through turn 3 and not get anything in return. And
because there was nothing to give. But if we put something in there to give...
Well, no. Turn 3 and turn 4 were originally supposed to be one instance. The problem was getting... They had to separate it because the information for that one area was just too large. So they separated the two dungeons.
Hashtag PS3.
Yeah, PS3 limitations, pretty much.
Lol.
But because if you notice, when you finish turn 3, the cutscene plays where you drop down in the elevator for turn 4, and then you go into turn 4 and start that. Mm-hmm. But it even happens in turn 1 where you get to run around and look at Bahamut's wings and everything. People stop caring after a while. They just fucking train pull the whole damn thing and sack everybody. Yeah, like, they don't want to spend time killing shit.
They don't want to because
they don't have anything to they don't have anything to incentivize the trash run. That's why.
So they just made it a room. That's what they did. And then
but I think for a lore-driven game, something gets lost there.
I mean, you're not wrong, but at the same time,
that's why we have the normal mode and the savage mode. I don't mind it if they would do things like that in the normal mode, because in the normal mode, that's there for your story. But in the savage mode, I just want to kill the goddamn boss, get my loot, and get out. I don't give a shit about the story, because there's no story for a savage fight.
Right,
but that's where the loot comes from, right?
Yeah.
I'll go back to how I said Destiny was really the first raid I played. In Destiny, and some of the raids, right, there are trash. It's all one seamless instance that you have to go through, and there are chests that have the ability to drop nice goodies, right? That it's in it of itself incentivizes people to do it, right? And if they didn't want to do it, they just move on. That's kind of my point here, right? Yes, it's true. People would eventually lose interest, but if there was something in there to hold their interest in the first place, maybe something would be different. That's kind of my point, right?
But like the Baldessian Arsenal. I think
the Baldessian Arsenal, right? That's prime example of people actually appreciating the loot. Every group I've ever been in that piece of content usually takes time to find the hidden chest to get the goodies that come out of there because there's some value attached to it.
You need to get the hidden chest to even. Well, I mean, you get the hidden chest because you want to upgrade your elemental gear. All the drops come
exactly. There's an incentive to do it, right? But in the case of Coil and Alexander, there was no incentive to do anything besides kill the boss. So that's what people are going to want to do because that's what they're incentivized to do.
Well, originally in T3, the chest that was in T3 had a chance to drop the Bluebird minion, and then they moved the Bluebird minion over to the treasure maps after a while.
So, I mean, this is all good, but I'm not sure how it pertains back to the MSQ. Maybe we're talking about incentive to do MSQ, right? Making it more difficult.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean...
No, you can't make the MSQ more difficult because they don't level lock the MSQ through item level. And you do get people in there who get absolutely slaughtered because they're like 100 eye levels lower than they should be.
Well, that's why I said earlier, like if at the start of the expansion there was the natural progression reset and built itself back up so that it was harder towards the end of the expansion.
I mean, the ultimate, the first point is people could not clear Steps of Faith to beat the MSQ, right? And that was too difficult for some people. But
do you think the rest of the expansion built up to that? Of A Realm Reborn built up to the Steps of Faith?
Yes, it did. Because there is the dungeons, they weren't as tunnely as they are now. Like there's things in the dungeons that you had to pay. Like if you pulled too many mobs in Aurum Vale, you were dead.
The problem with the Steps of Faith wasn't difficult. The problem is the problem with the Steps of Faith when it was released is when you finally wiped in the Steps of Faith, it didn't reset the dragon. So you had to wait till the dragon got to the end and you failed the DPS check in order to reset the instance.
That's
but
painful.
that took away half the time of the instance instantly, which means you technically only had 2 shots to beat it. Otherwise, you had to leave the dungeon and get back in there. It was very badly designed in the way they did it when you party wiped, because you just res back to the beginning and then you had to run all the way to the dragon to try and kill it.
So
but his HP was too high at that point, so you couldn't beat the dungeon.
So you would argue then that it's not difficult, it was just bad game design.
It was terrible game design. Like, I wiped twice on the Steps of Faith because the we didn't understand like the cannons and everything in that, and the party got mangled, and then we couldn't reset the boss. And vote abandon wasn't an option back then. So the first person to leave had to eat a 30-minute timer so the rest of us could leave.
Well, vote abandon was a thing, but you couldn't use it until you were out of combat, and you were required to be in combat the whole time.
Yeah. Like, Steps of Faith was just terribly designed.
I mean, it's at the same time, though, like, people still couldn't do it for mechanics. I didn't really quite remember that part of it, but at the same time,
when it was first released, the boss also had 500,000 more HP, and you had to hit him with the dragon killers in order to beat him. You couldn't not hit him with the dragon killers and beat him. You also had to like detonate the frickin' barrier of explosives at the front before he destroyed it in order to take off a good chunk.
Yeah, you had to do stuff. Like, you couldn't just face roll.
And it wasn't really explained well. Like, the MP, you could see the NPC shout, "Oh, get the cannons!" And it's like, okay, are you talking about the cannons at the bottom, or what cannons are we talking about? I didn't even know about the dragon killer cannons till my second run through, all the way at the top on the sides.
Well, I mean, you're not supposed to, right? You're supposed to figure it out. So
you're saying,
that's the point.
Would you say that Realm Reborn, as it was released, naturally built up to the difficulty that was presented in Steps of Faith, or do you think there was just a leap in difficulty, a jump, or just
there was definitely a curve? Like, you had to progress, you had to learn.
The difference, the thing with the Steps of Faith is SC wanted to try something different for once. They wanted to see like what kind of creative ways they could do with the MSQ, and unfortunately they got a bit too creative for their own good, because it alienated the player base. It alienated a majority of the player base who were used to a set standard, and suddenly the standard did a 180 on them, and they're just kind of like,
I
disagree.
I'm gonna have to disagree as well. Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
I disagree because I was a noob when I first started playing the game. I had no idea what was going on. And then by the time I got to Steps of Faith, I was like, okay, well, we actually need to do stuff here, and we need to figure it out, and we need to take time to do it. You know, it's not something that was just like 100% sprung on us, like, oh, we don't know what to do. Like, if you were paying attention during the patches, if you were progressing through even your relic weapon and doing primals and stuff like that, you had a way to become better at the game and learn how to do stuff, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna admit, the first time I did Steps of Faith, I just went in there and I probably would have had the same experience for Praetorium and the Castrum Meridianum. No one talks to you about what to do if you're a newbie there. No one says anything. No one tells you what your role is.
When did you do it?
Going
in Heavensward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going into Heavensward.
By that time, everybody expected most people to know what to do, or it was face rolling. So,
The problem is the item level requirements for the Praetorium and Castrum are so low that you could just solo the whole thing.
Well, I also had friends.
Back in
go on.
Back in A Realm Reborn, when stuff was new, people did talk about stuff. Like, Happy did put out guides, but for the most part, people did communicate. See, I don't disagree with guides. I think people should use them. I think people should use the tools that are available, especially when the community has people to make stuff to show you how to do stuff, especially if it's not relevant anymore, and it's been out for a while. But when stuff first comes out, people talk, or at least you should be talking to the people to try and figure stuff out. I mean, that's how I got Fish App down. I don't know, but apparently, other people didn't. What about you, Reggie, when you did it for the first time?
Oh, I mean, like, A Realm Reborn was all about communication. I felt like, and even before Vishat, Garuda was my wall. And it's embarrassing to say that now, but, being a fresh white mage from World of Warcraft, Garuda was like my first, that was kind of like a mini raid. And that had a lot of things that,
Are we talking extreme or hard mode?
Talking normal fucking Garuda 4-man. Oh. Yeah, you guys are laughing about that.
No,
but
I completely agree with him.
That was, I remember there was this guy that, so I used to work at a pharmacy, right? And there was this guy that played FF14 with me, and he would come deliver my drugs, right? And we would sit there and I'm like, dude, how did you get through this? He's like, man, I don't know, but like, it took us like an hour, and we were sitting there beating our heads against it. Like, you'll get it, but it's gonna take some time. And I remember it was like me and the tank, the DPS were dead, and we just like whittled her down to just get it done. But yeah, I feel like compared A Realm Reborn compared to Heavensward and Stormblood, we talked in everything. We talked in dungeons, talked in trials. Didn't matter. We talked because we had to get through it together.
As more people were introduced to the game, I think the communication took a hit. More guides there was more interest in it, so guides could flourish better. So the expectation and the adaptation of strats became more wide known faster, so that players really didn't need to. They didn't really have to teach anyone. I bet you the feeling that you guys are talking about would be present immediately if you just took a moment to cue in the mentor roulette. You'd find what you're talking about there.
Well, you find two types of things in the mentor roulette: noobs who aren't willing to listen to you at all in any way, shape, or form, or the other mentors who just kind of fuck you over completely.
It's interesting that you say that, right? Because the mentor roulette is designed to be mentored. It's in the name, but I find that funny. The first piece of content that really shaked the world for me was Sephiroth EX. Because when I did that fight, I thought I knew what I was doing. And boy, did I not know what I was doing, right? I never saw what mechanics could really do.
Oh, wasn't it great, though? Wasn't it just so great?
Like, I have fond memories of Sephiroth EX because I think that fight, I don't understand, right? As you go back, it feels like this game is getting easier in a lot of places. And I feel like a lot of the content that we call hard now is on par with some of the more easier content if you look at the game's past, right?
It wasn't just hard, it was also iconic because of its difficulty. Like,
so,
Titan,
yeah, no,
not even get me started.
I didn't find Titan difficult, but at the same time, I was the main tank, so I didn't have to move. Like, when you did Titan as the main tank, he never targeted you. You're like,
You're talking about extreme, right?
Both extreme and normal mode. He never targeted you for landslides or anything. You, like, as the main tank in Titan, you did dick in that fight. You sat there and you took hits.
Swap
well, yeah, but that's not really.
In extreme, you had to tank swap.
We're talking about, like, fights where everyone has a part to play, not really, like...
Yeah. Titan, extreme... Okay, what you said Sephiroth was in Heavensward, Titan was in A Realm Reborn.
Oh yeah, no, Titan cock-blocked everybody because the net coding was far worse at the time, and there was a massive delay in your movement. You actually had to learn how to time out when landslide was coming so you could move properly, or else you were going to get knocked off.
Oh, and the weight of the lands too, yeah, those were
like
to dodge out of.
Titan was not fun for people who had anything less than like a 50 megabit connection or at least less than 100 ms.
Holy
if you
crap.
did not have 100 ms,
like you said, Titan was easy to tank, but Titan was the reason I started tanking because people couldn't tank. I know how to tank swap.
I started tanking. I think the hardest fight for me in A Realm Reborn when I first started tanking was easily Garuda EX. Garuda EX was a tank fight because the spiny plumes mechanics taught you how provoked worked.
Oh yeah.
It showed you like, yeah, you could provoke, but you better do it at the right time or else you're just going to lose it all.
Do you guys think the simplicity is a result of polish? Do you think things are just better designed now, so that's why they seem to be easier than they were?
There's a lot of quality of life that we take for granted now that we did not have back then.
Yeah.
Because I know for sure the skills like themselves are just so powerful now, right? Like we have now,
that's a nature of power creep. It's present in every game.
I truly wonder what the opinion would be on the difficulty of the raid tier and of Stormblood and like the ultimate fights if Red Mage was not introduced for progression, because a lot of players don't really understand, but the ability to chain res players back to back in brute force mechanics shaves so much time in the long run.
It's not just the introduction of Red Mage. The Red Mage helped, but what really changed progression was CD resets upon wipe.
Yep.
Oh my god,
one
yeah.
thing that changed everything.
Everything. Even your pot.
It's just a lot of stuff went into what makes the game seem so easy now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we as players have improved as well, you know. And then when you see things,
that's hard to say. That's hard to say, right?
No.
The game has gotten so much easier when you look at certain pieces of content in a vacuum, right?
The game.
If I were to do minimum eye level, Lakshmi versus minimum eye level Sephiroth now, and like now, I'm not even talking about like now and then, right? Now, Sephiroth's still harder.
Sephiroth's minimum eye level for the difficulty of the content is lower than Lakshmi's minimum eye level for the difficulty of the content. I think before the introduction of Sophia...
But I'm just talking about flat mechanics too.
Like if here and there...
Sephiroth was one of the Warring Triad, so it's not fair to compare Lakshmi to Sephiroth. You would want to compare
the two best examples
is
Sword.
Lord.
No, the two best examples
Byakko and Sephiroth are literally parallels and are released.
No. Don't compare those guys. The two.
Why? They're released at the exact same points in the expansion.
No. The best two to compare are the two hardest extreme trials: Thornton and Shinryu. Those are the two best examples you can throw out there for anybody.
Both of them stack really well, though.
They're comparative in where they're released in the story wise. If you're gonna compare, if you're gonna compare Lakshmi to anybody, you're gonna compare Lakshmi to Bismarck. That's who you're gonna compare.
Well, Bismarck
and Lakshmi's still easier than Bismarck.
Bismarck's a joke. Oh my god!
At minimum eye level, Bismarck can get pretty crazy.
I one-shot Bismarck Extreme and just walked away like this is a fucking joke. Whatever.
Well, I mean the introduction of that in the MSQ is like what level 57.
Well, I mean like we were talking about the extreme variant.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And Bismarck Extreme was a joke.
If we go down the list, right, and we're talking about the points of these fights where they're released, right? I'm comparing Byakko to Sephiroth because they were both released in the 0.2 patches of the respective expansions, right? They mirror each other. They fill in that exact same slot. Yeah. The difficulty is night and day. Like, it's not even close. Byakko is nowhere near difficult. Minimum eye level versus minimum eye level Sephiroth.
The thing about Sephiroth as well is if you fuck up in Sephiroth, you're permanently gone out of the fight. There is no recovery.
It's harder.
It's unforgiving, not necessarily harder. Like if
it's harder. Sephiroth is harder than Byakko.
Of difficulty. I'm just saying, if something is hard, that is a form of difficulty.
Yeah, like Byakko does not compare, right? And let's look at Ravana EX versus Susanoo EX. Ravana is harder.
Yeah, Ravana's harder.
It's not even up for debate. Right, we already said we can put Bismarck and Lakshmi at a tie if you guys want to. I think Lakshmi's easier, but fine. Susanoo is not as hard as Sephiroth. Sephiroth is harder than. If we go next to the next fight, which would be Nidhogg and Tsukiyomi, Nidhogg is harder. Do you know how many people fucked up the nails and then had to do the mechanic that was so annoying in PF that they decided to reuse it for freaking Midgar's armor, that fight speaks for itself. Like, Minstrel's Ballad, Nidhogg's Rage is way harder than Tsukiyomi's Pain.
Oh, are you talking about the Bomberman bombs or whatever?
Yeah.
It's so stupid.
It wasn't hard, but Jesus Christ.
I mean, the bombs weren't necessarily that difficult. If you
No, it was the nail phase that killed most people.
It's even the ad phase.
Yeah.
Even the ad phase, people were messing that up.
The ad phase, people were like, where do I stand?
People forget you used to have to bait that goddamn dragon that didn't care.
Fireball, yeah.
Yeah, because he flashed the closest person and shoot a fireball at the furthest person, and then if the tanks wouldn't swap properly, they could accidentally cleave everybody, or they'll kill themselves because they get stacking buffs.
Nidhogg was the last hard trial we had, and then Sophia came out. It changed everything.
But even Sophia is harder than actually that's hard to say.
Sophia is so bloody.
Sophia versus Suzaku, I think they're about even.
They're comparable.
It's not a blowout. I think Sophia is probably slightly harder, but they both have this.
Sophia's easy. Sophia doesn't have an enrage timer. That's the problem. You can recover from Sophia infinitely,
but people can't do meteors.
Sophia will start infinitely using the lightning AoEs.
This is also
no, she won't. She'll do the white and black mechanic, and only she'll do one color on everybody, and it's a white.
This is also
I don't know. I've seen an entire party wipe, like except for the tank and the healer, rest us back up, and we killed it. I've never seen
every fight in Heaven's Ward has an enrage.
Tsukiyomi?
No, Sophia.
That fight has an enrage. I'm pretty sure.
It definitely does.
I've never seen the enrage.
It basically makes it so that every person has the same color,
and then you'll die.
It kills you.
It's gotta be like what, a 13-minute enrage, because like we've killed it so like 12.
Well, all enrage on EX Primals are relatively long.
No, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they are.
You also got to take into the fact that Sophia was the first fight where if you fell off, you don't get punished for it. You do come back as a dead body, but you do come back.
as a dead body, but like it's just...
But that persisted in that happens in Suzaku too, so I can't even.
Sephiroth was the last fight where they punish you for falling off.
Yeah, that was. You could even fall off in Nidhogg, and then Zervan versus Seiryu. Seiryu wins by default because I don't even know what happened there.
Well, the problem with Zervan came out in the time of 20% balance, and it was pretty much.
Skip Soar.
That's not the only reason why.
Okay, if you actually did Soar, if you actually did the mechanics like when it was actually the way it was supposed to be,
Zervan's
not even hard. Soar's not that hard.
I mean,
Soar's harder than anything.
I mean, we can say all right, sure. Let's say
in Seiryu or the Double Blast, or
it's harder than anything in Seiryu, right? But the fact that you can skip it still means like, and the thing is, you don't even need to be good to skip it. You don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Zervan was.
If
like,
you had to be
ridiculous.
good to skip Soar, it wouldn't have been a meme. Groups were literally expecting to skip it, which means on average groups could skip it, even if regardless of how good they were. There just had to be a level of competence.
Yeah, I mean,
most wipes on Zervan happened because someone fucked up.
I think that fight's comparable, if not easier, than Seiryu.
At the end of the day, the idea you're putting out there is that
on average
getting
easier over time. Yes, the Heaven's Ward fights.
I can agree, but I can also see where there are some fights that are.
And I'm not using the rate tier for this. I'm not using the rate tier for this comparison because that has shifting changes that were so big that affected the way it affected the landscape of rating, especially in Heaven's Ward, where raiders were rating in that era was so schizophrenic.
It's not only that, but like you got to remember, like Heaven's Ward was the tinkering process of homogenizing icons within the fights, like how certain icons represented certain things within a fight, which are more fine-tuned now and
easier to recognize.
In Stormblood, like in Heaven's Ward, Bismarck and Ravana icons are a lot different than the icons in the later fights. Thornton and what's the 24-man raid called? Void Arc. That's where the homogenization of icons on the players actually started dictating like what certain things do. Like, oh, this is what the stack icon looks like. Oh, and here's this spread icon. Here's this icon.
Those fights still ended up being relatively difficult because it's what you do with them too, right? I'll agree. Like that helps as far as figuring out what the mechanics do, but those fights were still just flat out harder on average than their Stormblood counterpart. It's the only fights that's really brought into question is Suzaku and Zaryu.
I'm okay with them being. This has always been my. When we're talking about extreme primals, we're talking about the MSQ. The difficulty of it, whether it's easy or it's getting easier, my main point is, if it's fun, then I'm gonna do it. I would wish that they would increase the difficulty a little bit and challenge the players, because I think the player base needs to be challenged to I mean, if you're not having some kind of challenge, if you're not getting some kind of, oh man, I conquered this, why are you playing the game? You're just playing it for story.
A lot of players are still like, a lot of players are still getting that sense of feeling. Okay, so the difference is like, I found a lot of the stuff in Heaven's Ward easy because I started in 1.0. I started in
Heaven's Ward and most of that. So that's
I did 1.0. I did ARR. ARR was my learning curve. When I got to Heaven's Ward, I found a lot of the fights in Heaven's Ward easy, besides Gordius and Midas and their shit show of a thing. But no, a lot of the trials for me.
At Thornton DA, that fight's not easy.
I beat Thornton EX on the first day, so I can't really.
It's hard.
Whoop. Did he just whip his dick out? I think he just did.
I had already beaten Gordius by the time Thornton came out, so...
Congratulations, Thornton EX is still a difficult fight.
No, Thornton EX is right under A3S in terms of difficulty. That fear mechanic is a pain in the ass to deal with, especially when the eyes start shifting around all over the place and shit's everywhere. People aren't paying attention.
The sheer number of mechanics in Thornton makes it a difficult fight, whether you're capable of...
The mechanics themselves are easy. The problem is he throws 6 or 7 of them at you at once, and you got to figure out.
Yeah,
that's the point.
That's the point about Thornton is like the precursor to Ultimate Fight, because that's how they play out the same exact way. None of the rarely are any of the individual mechanics that Ultimates to this day throw at you difficult in a vacuum. It's just having to do it all.
Yeah, I mean that's how bosses make. I mean, any one mechanic is easy. It's when you get 5 or 6 of them all at once, then you're just kind of like, the fuck am I doing?
Exactly. That's what makes a good fight, and that's what makes a fight difficult, and that's what makes Thornton difficult. It is difficult.
That's what makes it fun, right? And that's what I'm saying. People want to play your game to have fun. If you're making it easier to progress through the game, then people aren't having fun. That's
my problem with the MSQ, and I want to ask you guys this, right?
Yeah.
Why does it feel like the expectation for doing the MXQ is to do it all in like one day and then move on to the next, the big end game thing?
Okay, so the MSQ
there's two things.
Heaven's Word and Stormblood are only 10 levels long.
No. What I mean,
no.
I mean, like, why? So this Xenos fight, right? We just got. Why does the expectation for that is to wake up, run through all of that in like 20 minutes, and then, do the Yojimbo, find out how to unlock the Yojimbo fight, or if this was a patch where a raid tier was released, do the normal mode of the raid tier or the savage mode or something like that. Some people don't even do the story, right? Why doesn't the story feel like a premier piece of content with a difficulty curve that takes some time to complete for the average player, in its difficulty? Why? Because it's an MMO, right? Everything's not supposed to be done in a day. It's supposed to be something that takes time to do.
It's not, but the Square Enix has put a stance that the story should be easily accessible by everybody. They want everyone to have the story. and the challenge comes from content thereafter. Gotta remember, when people hit okay, let's use Heaven's Ward versus Stormblood as an example again, and this is something where Stormblood actually did something better than Heaven's Ward. The final fight in Stormblood against Shinryu was harder than Thornton.
That's true.
Yeah.
It was very difficult for a very good many number of people, because they expected you to have your job quest finished with your job gear.
Oh yeah,
Half
a lot
the
of
people who did
Also,
Shinryu,
I should say, I'm not asking why the MSQ is easy, right? I'm asking why is the player base's expectation that it should be.
I'm gonna tell you why.
Well,
Because
tell me
there's other forms of content.
why. Okay.
it's not just that. People are
But
just
the
expecting them to,
MSQ
like, to get
could
through it.
be the MSQ could be another form of content too, right?
But
It could be, but the MSQ is used as an unlocking tool. Like, you get through the MSQ to
Pretty
unlock
much.
this content. If they made the content too challenging and it too long for people to unlock it, there'd either be two problems going on. One, the player pool would be too small for those who could get through it quickly, and there wouldn't be enough people to actually do the content repeatedly over with. Or two, people would get frustrated with the content because they suck at the game and they can't do it, and they unsub.
I just think nobody wants to work for anything. That's honestly
Well,
what it is.
you're not wrong.
That's
You're not wrong.
pretty apparent.
I'm not saying it has to be anywhere. I'm not saying it has to be extreme.
Welcome to
primal.
North America 2019.
But it-
It's
bro.
not
It
just
can be-
North America.
It can be more than just a
Yeah.
striking dummy.
The world,
Which,
like
more
no,
often than not,
it's
is what happened.
it's a well documented fact that a good majority of the world does not want to work when they want to entertain themselves. There is no like it's why there's a lot of games that have what I like to call hand holding, where like there's prompts that tell you how to do everything. There's a lot of
This game has no hand holding and it's still somehow becoming super easy. It's amazing.
There's a
lot of hand
There's a
holding.
lot of hand holding.
This
What?
is the
Well,
only
not
no.
in the way that the jobs are played.
No.
way.
This is
no,
the
not that
only-
way, but-
Okay, in the terms of the way mechanics work out, this is one of the only MMOs that actually highlight and tell you where shit's going to happen. Like, oh, this is a ground AoE. Oh, this is a cleave. Oh, this is how this is going to work. Oh, look at this big glowing
That's
circle.
because when
Don't
it doesn't
fucking stand
happen,
in it.
That's because when it doesn't do that, it's a mechanic.
No, but if you play any other MMO going through like their natural story or their regular like leveling dungeons, they don't even have those kind of indications.
But are there jobs like rotations as convoluted as 14s can get at times? I think
Sometimes
that's
they're
probably
used.
that's why that's probably why I think that's the way it is. Like for openers alone on jobs can be like
Well,
upwards of 50 buttons on some jobs. Like
50
that's a
buttons
lot.
in this game?
50 buttons, yeah. I'm
Okay,
not saying
that's
50 different
rotations.
buttons.
Yeah.
That's a rotation, but an opener should be your first 30 seconds, and the most buttons you can get.
Well,
in the
you
first
get
30
what I mean.
Yeah, the most
the
buttons you can
rotation.
get in the first 30 seconds is like a max of 35 is the most you can get. And that's a bard who gets a shit ton of fucking procs at the start.
I mean, either way, going back to the MSQ and why it is the way it is, the MSQ, it does take up a significant portion of the content.
It's making my
But
thumb work is what it's doing.
It is not all of the content, and it's not intended to be the majority of the content.
Well, I mean,
So
you-
it's
you
it's
get
a significant portion. It's like, let's say, maybe a third.
Well, no, you got to look at the MSQ like an actual Final Fantasy game. You remember, this is a Final Fantasy game
that's
first
what I'm
and an
driving
MMO
at.
second. Every main story in Final Fantasy is easy as shit. You can dogpile your way through that and fuck everything except for a few key points where it's bullshit. Third form Seymour, fuck you.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that's what I'm driving at.
the
is
original release of 5 was pretty hard.
the story, but the story
And-
is just
Three.
meant to be
Okay, 1, 2, and 3
enjoyed
were grindy as shit, and everyone knows it.
for the story, and then you go and you do the optional bosses, and you do all that stuff. But if you even step back for a second and look at a new player coming into the MSQ, like I said, I did 2 alts in skipping through the cutscenes. It still took me several weeks to get an alt to max level, but I mean, that's me only spending a few hours a day on it, right? If I grinded it out, maybe a couple weeks max. But if you do all the cutscenes and you watch all the cutscenes, it's gonna take you at least a month.
A month.
At least. Yeah, if you're watching all the cutscenes
how long of a
from
day?
level 1 to level 70 and beyond, it's going to take you at least a month if you're working a job and you're doing...
So basically 4 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take you at least a month to do that.
I think the true answer to my question is that it's just not like the premier content they want to give out. That's
no,
really...
it is. No, their entire focus is on the story. Nothing in this
game
is
the
done
premier end game content,
unless the story is like a part of it. Okay, everything all their decisions is based upon what is given in the lore and within the story.
I mean, a lot of MMOs do that too. They just don't do it to the same extent as 14 does.
Okay, a lot of MMOs don't do
everything.
Trust me. A lot of MMOs will ignore the story just for the sake of like.
Well, I'm saying like there's always a in-lore reason for why something exists, right? I mean, I want to see how they work near into fucking 14th lore because it's supposed to. It has
but I'm just saying, if you sit down and play this as a single-player game, right, and for the story, and you're just starting out, and you play A Realm Reborn, Heaven's Word, and Stormblood all together. The story is huge. It is not insignificant. And while so when the patch came out, what did I say? It felt like I went to reach for a box of Cheez-Its and there was only 2 Cheez-Its in the box. I'm still hungry. But that's because I've already consumed the rest of the box. Right?
Yeah, but to give me an idea, like
I've already consumed all of the story so far, and so when I got the story in 4.56, I had all of this that came beforehand, and this little tidbit that I got was, while it was good, I still want more, and you want that to be a thing when you're leading up into an expansion.
You feel guilty about eating that box of Cheez-Its, you fat piece of shit?
If there was a better difficulty curve for the MSQ content, when we get to this point, the second half of the 0.5 patch, where there's no content coming afterwards for a fair amount of time, right? That Xenos fight could have been much harder than it was.
Okay,
there's nothing coming next, right?
Since we've gotten.
You got to remember, like the reason why the Xenos content isn't hard is because not everyone has the tools to actually survive solo content. They really don't. You can't expect something to like be mechanically challenging or hit really fucking hard when you're playing as like a gimped ass class like Monk or even Black Mage, who have no really good source of healing themselves in content.
Duty actions.
They could add duty actions,
Potions
yes, but
in this game.
Potions don't do shit.
Healing
make them do shit if you want them. That's not
if a Black Mage is gonna take an ether potion into a fight, why isn't he gonna take a healing potion? He could.
Yeah,
he could.
The problem is the healing potions. The healing potions just don't do anything because they. I
mean, again, like this, they don't
do enough.
They don't do anything now because there's no need for them to do anything, right? But if we were in that situation, it's not unlikely they have answers to that, right? What would a job do if it was unable to face a prolonged instance by taking damage, given that it doesn't have any tools to recover HP? I gave you one. A potion or a duty action. Both will fulfill that need. That's why, dude, that's literally what duty actions are for. They're supposed to spice up the content, right?
Yeah, but people don't like them.
They don't.
I mean, they really don't. They really don't. Name me anybody who liked the duty actions options in a lot of the instances.
I don't know anybody that I don't know anyone that hates them as much as you're saying, right? Especially if you only have to click it when you're dying. That's not that bad.
Hey, man, I painted the shit out of those pictures in
Heck
Demon
yeah,
Chattanooga, dude. I was the scholar with the typhoon, man.
Those pictures took up my uptime.
Yeah, when you have to, like, when they give you a duty action, you also have to fit the duty action into your rotation. A lot of players hate that.
Yeah,
but
this is a solo story instance. That's not gonna. The people that care about that are usually caring about FF logs.
You can't weave in your rotation. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you're supposed to be the warrior of light. You're not supposed to need this shit to get through this. You're supposed to be
what about the warriors of light that are healers and heal themselves anyway? Shut up.
Why do we take 7 other people in with us?
Right.
Well, technically,
Jimbo called us out on that. He was like, "You and the 7 other people with you."
That was funny. I laughed at that.
I guess you're the warrior of light, but you got your little posse here too. My point is, no, there isn't. I'll agree, right? The MSQ to an extent is supposed to be something that's a gateway to the rest of it, right? But when it reaches its soft conclusion, there is no reason for it to still feel like it's just a gateway to something else. If you want to nerf it afterwards because you're eventually going to release something,
okay. Let's try something different. The MSQ is designed for a very specific item level, normally much lower than what the raid tier has to offer. Okay. Try going to do the MSQ fight, and what's the
minimum item level?
Item level that would be available.
It won't be hard.
It won't be hard.
No. I leveled an alt, so I just finished leveling alt on Gilgamesh to level 70. You know what my item level was when I cleared the Xenos fight? It's 345. I had the...
That's how you have to be that high to get into fucking Gimlet Dark.
Well, no, wait, sorry. It was 360 because I did the Gimlet Dark at 360.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So, I just barely, I did the Gimlet Dark just barely at 360 because I did the job level 70 quest, and then I bought, some 380 accessories just to fill in my item level. And, so I was literally minimum item level for the Xenos fight. I walked in there and I cleaved them to death. It was no problem.
It's not this kind of content that you think it is where it scales up. It doesn't. It's just easy, right? And again, if it were something, I think it could genuinely be something that's difficult to do now. Or you know what? That's not even true, right? I think they could just leave it as a difficult content and not nerf it afterwards when the actual expansion comes out. Because this is the climax of the story you're currently trying to tell. So the people that are interested in doing it will start from that point. And if depending on what they're doing with jump potions, right? I'm not sure if Stormblood's going to get a jump potion come Shadowbringer's release. But if that does end up happening, they're going to skip this fight anyway. So the people that want to skip it are going to skip it, and the people that didn't want to skip it and want to experience are going to get the experience that they want.
Well, I think that's why they're creating the new game plus option as well.
On that note, we've hit almost an hour and 20 minutes. So
I wanted to talk about Chrysalis and the backlash.
All right,
came out.
Everybody, do some closing thoughts. And then we will pick this conversation up. If there's interest for it, we'll pick up this conversation next Thursday.
I'm lying in bed scratching myself. I have no closing comments.
Continue.
I just
go on.
MSQ. I feel like if they make it fun and they introduce some puzzles to get rid of the monotony of the corridor. If they introduce some puzzles, some brain teasers, or something like that, and I even agree that adding some duty action, like Sora was saying, to solo instances would be fun. And I just want the MSQ to be fun, and I want it to be entertaining.
So basically, remove all the fetch quests in the MSQ. Got it.
It can't just all be fetch quests, is what he's saying.
That's pretty much what the whole MSQ is. It's a giant.
And that's not good. It's fetch quests followed by a vomit of exposition.
Yeah, WoW did it better, I feel.
I mean, people say they want voice dialogue, and that would make them more invested in the story.
Yeah, that's That's what I say
That's
about WoW better.
I agree. Because having to sit there and read all that gets cumbersome.
But I don't agree with that because I grew up reading books. So
I grew up playing 2D RPGs.
I think certain
Super Nintendo.
I think certain scenes, like certain things that are inconsequential don't need voice acting, right? Like even in older games, like Final Fantasy X, for example, majority of it was voice acted, but there were points where it wasn't. If it were structured more like that, I'd appreciate it. But given the nature of it's an ongoing story and it's an MMO, I'm pretty sure they probably have the money to do that. Whether or not they want to is the real question.
Well, another issue they have with voice acting are the issues where the voice actors aren't available and they have to keep switching them up. Remember when Alphinaud switched an ARR to his voice he has now in Heavensward? That was jarring as fuck.
Yep.
I mean, that happens, right? I wouldn't account for that.
But anyways, those were my closing thoughts. Everybody else needs to do closing thoughts now.
I don't know. I only jumped into the middle of it. For me, the MSQ is nothing but a showpiece to get to the main content. So I don't care if it's easy or not. I'll watch my cutscenes, enjoy my story, get through it, and then I'll actually go do the real content.
Yeah.
For me, I think there's a lack, like overall, even in the expansions, there's a lack of a solid difficulty curve. I think there's this weird jump from content that's static to content that's difficult, and the MSQ and like dungeons feels like it's just static, where there could be more done to really incentivize doing that content, or at least redoing it in some ways. Hopefully New Game Plus really emphasizes the hard plus on that. I'd love to try it, but it's
well, I mean, the final dungeon of most
closing thoughts. Jin, go.
Closing thoughts. Yeah, this thing where they do when you make you play Ishtola and Hien and Alphinaud, I don't like it. I think it's dumb. I think it's like it's trying to get us to care about the characters themselves. I'm sorry.
What's wrong with that in the story driven
I
game?
don't care. Okay, honestly, when Ishtola did that thing, I thought it was epic. But Hien was a bad delivery on how they did that.
That's because you're a samurai, and he was like,
it's not just
a baby's first Sam.
It's not even the fact. It's just I don't care about Hien, even in this story. I think he was done after.
If they had done an Instidian roleplay, that would have been dope. Even though it would have been jump and you would have died.
That's not true because Instidian's jump is strong enough to kill a cannon.
I should say this right now. The most interesting part of the MSQ happened off screen, just so you know.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Estidian and Elidibus Xenos meet on the battlefield, and that happened off screen. I just want SC to sit down and just congratulate themselves. Because we needed to watch and play as Hien Yugiri and Lise get their asses handed. We needed to see that. We couldn't see my boy Estidian come in there and just like off screen Elidibus.
Yeah, it would.
We couldn't see that.
It would have been a climatic thing.
You got to look at it from like a storytelling standpoint.
There's no reason why we didn't get to see Estinian, who was an important character in the last arc of this game, visually fight the main antagonist of the current arc. There's no reason.
Anyways, Jin, was that what you were trying to say? Is that all you wanted to say?
I think...
I hate the roleplay.
That'd be like if Frieza killed Vegeta off screen and Goku...
I think usually the things they do for like these kinds of things with the role play mechanics and stuff like that is usually a gateway to what's going to come in Shadowbringers. If they're going to try to get me invested in the new characters for Shadowbringers, they better do a good job. Cause
you mean the returning characters? We haven't heard of anybody.
There's no new characters. There's no new characters coming out.
Well, there's Innocence.
There's Innocence, which is
that could be a fucking primal for all we know. That's what he looks like.
Yeah, but I don't think we're getting anything else. Like what? Give me a roleplay of Fat Cat. Yeah,
sure.
Well,
no. I think the problem is like if they keep introducing more new characters, it just means the older characters get left out in the dust. It's time to like start fleshing out the characters we have now.
Yeah,
I honestly think the Scions just need to travel with us in these cutscenes, and like Alphinaud did in And Alphinaud and Estinian did in freaking Heaven.
They do, but I think they don't do that because most of the time when we get in Heaven's Ward, when we finally got access to the Scions, we had the ability to teleport. We don't walk everywhere like we did in Heaven's Ward.
It was nice. It was just nice seeing them in every cutscene and interacting with them and then having something to say.
Yeah, that was actually a good point.
Like some of the characters that we're supposed to care about just flat out disappear for like majority of the time. Where was Thancred for majority of Stormblood? Where was he?
He was infiltrating. He was
in Garlemald.
Why? He's the main character. He should be here. Send some nameless ninja to do that.
He's the spy of the Cylons.
Then somebody else to do it. Thancred's the main character. He should be with us.
No. The reason why Thancred is there is because Thancred has always been in Garlemald. He pretty much was born there.
Okay. Oh, was he?
Yeah, his original hometown was overtaken by Garlemald.
I think
he grew up there.
I think we can talk about this in another podcast. I feel.
Oh God, NPCs and how they're in relation to the character. There we go. That's a good one.
Just wanted to get the closing thoughts. Reggie.
Reggie, what are you?
I just want to say that if all of Hien's training to become a great, samurai and leader of his nation culminated into 3 abilities. It's no wonder you lost your nation and we had to bail you out.
I wonder what his old dad was going to do. He probably only knew fucking Jimpu or something.
You also got to look at it like this way. Giving the character 3 abilities, you look at how hopeless his situation is. Like, you ain't beating this fuck. He's going to whoop your ass. And that's what Xenos is supposed to represent. Yeah. Xenos is supposed to represent a massive wall of opposition.
You can make a character look cool and still come out.
Hien's not a warrior of light. He can't do a Midari Setsugeka. Get out of here. He's only got one.
Those are good points for sure.
Especially he does not have the power of the Echo. Like, he's just immortal.
What are you talking about, dude? The samurais in the freaking story know half this stuff.
This is true. The samurai.
The samurai quest line.
Yeah. All they do is Tenka Goken. That's
the ad samurais know Tenka Goken. Why doesn't he end, man?
Because he's only fighting Xenos. He don't need a Tenka Goken.
Man, that doesn't stop them in freaking Palace of the Dead. Tenka Goken knocks you back and stuns you. I mean, have Heaven on High. Why can't he do that to Xenos?
He can't do that to Xenos.
Xenos isn't immune to stun.
And I thought we were getting
I tried to shield bash Xenos. It didn't work very well. He just smacked me in the face, and I'm like, oh.
There's no reason for him to be as pathetic as he was in that display. Just saying.
Hey, dot's more potent.
It's purposely designed to make him look pathetic because in reality he is pretty pathetic compared to Xenos.
You can make him look all right. But what do you think is better? Having a literal pathetic rat get beaten by a giant gorilla ape, or having a very highly skilled rat fight and do its best, but still get overwhelmed by the might?
Okay, let's look at it this way. When you did the first fight against Xenos in the MSQ, you had all your abilities and you were a badass doing all the fancy shit trying to beat him.
And I got beat.
And then he just looked at you and beat the hell out of you. And you're just like... Well, no, because I could have beaten him if they just didn't pull out the whole bullshit cutscene move.
Sorry for the Dragon Ball Z references, but I have another one that perfectly summarizes this. All right, when Krillin gets beat by Frieza, nobody bats an eye. But when Goku does, they're like, "Oh crap, we might actually be screwed." Why do you think that is? It's because one of them actually had a chance. And that's my point here. If he had looked more capable when he was bro, Yugiri was doing the work, man. I was just hitting Hikaze. Yugiri was over there like Shadow Clone Jutsu for my country.
The knowledge of my forebears.
And just doing all this crazy stuff, and I'm over here, bro, just spamming Hikaze. Yugiri's over there like, Hien, what are you doing? My best.
I did my best.
I did my fucking best.
Like, what? Why is I just don't like it. It makes it feel weird. That's my opinion. I think if it were presented better and we had more to do and it made Hien look better, I would have liked.
Maybe, but then you get the poor people who are like, I've never seen these skills. What do they do, and how do I work with it?
You can literally have the skill go in succession like they do for every other.
They could, but as we've seen with noobs and idiots, they still don't know how to use their skills in proper order when then they highlight.
And we will talk about that next week.
That's very rare.
I mean, it's a legitimate point.
It's not that rare, honestly.
It's very rare that you see somebody walk up and fucking rage at the
I figured out the solution. They could have done this like they do in PvP. Just one button.
Yeah, they could also
that's
do
true
that.
enough.
That's a good, for sure.
Sure
but then you open up the door. Why don't they do that for us? And then,
no. I'm pretty sure they're going to do that in Shadowbringers. They're going to do that in Shadowbringers.
They're not going to do that.
No, because if you think about it, if they want to add more skills without consolidating skills, they need to merge skills together so that they only take up one space on the hotbar. I have three different combos. If my three different combos went from 9 buttons to one button, I would be fine.
Reggie, end this show right now.
Okay, all right. If anybody has any comments below, we will read all your comments and respond appropriately.
Maybe.
Sora's just jealous because my dick's bigger than him and I'm Asian.
Okay. So, anyway...
Half Asian. Clarification.
On that note, this has been a great conversation, and we'll pick this back up on Thursday. Does anybody else have anything else to say? Because I'm ready to end it here.
Nope.
All right, everybody. Have a good night. This has been the Misfortune Podcast, and we'll see you next Thursday. Thank you very much.
You're really not calling it Misfortune Podcast, are you?